This is Enzo X from Meris. Most powerful guitar synthesizer pedal on the market. But if you look carefully, not only does Enzo X track your guitar and bass inputs, but there's nothing plugged into the pedal right now. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you are hearing me play Enzo X as a MIDI controlled, fully featured desktop polyphonic synthesizer. What's up and welcome back to another video. My name is Devin Belanger and today I'm very excited to bring you a world first look at Meris's brand new pedal in their X series, the Enzo X. So confession, when Meris first reached out and asked me to be a part of this release and a beta tester for Enzo X, I was honored, but I was a little confused. I am a synth player first and foremost, and a pretty average guitar player on the side. But almost immediately after getting Enzo X into the studio, I realized that what Meris had done is not just create another synthesizer guitar pedal, but create a fully featured polyphonic desktop synthesizer in pedal format. Enzo X can either be played by tracking a audio input, usually guitar or bass, or over MIDI as a fully featured desktop polyphonic synthesizer. In practice, what this means is you have a really full featured synthesis engine that you can trigger in very non-traditional ways where you're getting the ability to play a synth with another instrument like guitar or bass or voice, as we'll see in a second, but you're not giving up that sound quality and you're not giving up features. So we'll get to the demo song in just a second, but today I'm gonna give you a demo and my thoughts from a synthesist's perspective. But bear in mind that everything you're hearing can be controlled by a guitar or a bass as well. Thanks so much to Meris for asking me to be a part of this release. They're not paying anything, but they did send over the pedal free of charge and get my thoughts on it early before it was released. A couple of my changes made it into the final build, which is pretty cool. And yeah, thank you to you for watching. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And let's get started with a demo song where every single synth sound, full stop, is only the Enzo X. All right, now there's a lot to unpack with that demo song here. So firstly, I was using the Enzo X as a MIDI controlled synthesizer. We'll get to some of those patches later. then I used EnzoX via guitar mode to play in a bass line with a Moog bass that I programmed with my guitar. Then, to push the envelope even further, I did the lead with my voice going into EnzoX. So what you can hear if I solo that is this lead sound where I'm singing into the synthesis engine. So cool. I'm not really sure if it's meant to be used as a vocal processor, but just keep that in mind. And if you do want to use it as a vocal processor, it works best if you put auto-tune and a noise gate beforehand. Here's what my vocals sounded like before they hit EnzoX. Don't judge me. Before we get into my walkthrough and tutorial for EnzoX, which will help you if you're a guitar player or a synth player, so stay tuned, I wanted to show off the Blade Runner patch because, let's be honest, every synthesizer I get, I always try to make a Blade Runner patch, and I think it turned out pretty great on EnzoX as well. So cool, right? Well, next, let's do a tutorial and walkthrough of how to use EnzoX, how to program patches, and what its main features are. All right, well, let's do a tutorial on how to use the EnzoX. And if you're a guitarist watching this, these tips and this workflow will absolutely work for you as well as if you're using it with MIDI like I am. So first things first, you have two choices for what kind of UI to use, just like every Meris pedal from this X series. And it really is up to you which one you want to use. And I personally find, let me just change this here. Text view versus graphic view. So you can use these bubbles here for this beautiful graphic view. I think this probably works best if you are somebody who's coming from maybe the guitar world, because it really is a great style of workflow. The UI is beautiful, but for me, coming from the synth world, I like having more parameters on hand. So I'd actually recommend trying out the text view first, and if you are comfortable with it, you'll probably be able to edit stuff quicker because you don't have to go through pages. So it makes it less menu divey. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's start off with an initialized preset here. So we've got a bunch of initialized presets near the end of the list, and they sound like this when you just start playing them. Very, very beautiful sound, and I think, it's a great starting point. Let's go ahead and we'll turn off the reverb first, as fantastic as it sounds, just because I want to kind of hear what the synth is doing. So we go into the different modules like that, reverb and delay are under ambience, and now we've got just a basic sound. Awesome. So yeah, let's go ahead and check out our oscillator section. So the core of any synthesizer, as many of you know, is the oscillators. Those are the sound generators. So we've got two oscillators here, and we can mix, we can detune, we can change the wave shapes, as well as change, here's where we change if we're gonna have a polysynth or a monosynth, like this. Polysynth lets you play chords, and arp synth. We get an arpeggiator built in there, which is really cool. The last two options here are if you just want to use an input and keep your dry signal dry and just use this as a processing tool. But we'll go to polysynth for the remainder of this video because that is what makes this so cool. we've got a fully functional polysynth in here. So let's go ahead and we'll just start off with one oscillator. Hopefully you guys can see, yeah, you guys can see my, my screen pretty well. So we'll go ahead and turn off oscillator 2 gain here. As you can see, it's really simple, just like the LVX and MercuryX when you're in this text view. Each one of these knobs corresponds to the parameters, and it's really fast. You get access to basically 5 parameters at a time per page, so really quick. So now we are just only hearing, let's turn our level up a little bit here. We are just only hearing a single oscillator. Nice, clean digital oscillators. Now we can change the wave shapes here. We've got a saw, as we're hearing. We've got a triangle. We've got a square. Now, one of my pieces of criticism, and I did talk to Angela about this, is that there is at this time no pulse width modulation. I know, tough, but that is something you can get around with some cool different tips in terms of modulating the LFO and getting kind of a similar effect, but would be cool to see in a future update if possible. So let's go ahead and we'll bring in oscillator 2. Let's make these squares for now. I like square waves. So oscillator 2, let's bring in the gain. We'll make oscillator 2 a square as well. And now we've got detune. Let's detune them and make a really nice wide, not wide, but chorusy polysynth sound. Really good sounding digital oscillators, honestly. And again, remember, you can control all of this with a guitar, with whatever instrument you want to put into your audio input, which is so cool. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll change one of these to be a fifth. We can detune them so you can get that classic fifth sound. We can do an octave. We can do all sorts of weird stuff. But I'm going to leave it as a unison sound for now. And here's where we also get access to cross mod, which is such a cool addition. Cross mod is modulating the 2 oscillators against each other, creating some basic FM. And it's actually a fairly complex synthesis style to have right here on this little pedal, right? So if you want to get a metallic sound, that's how. We'll leave a little bit of it in, but I want to go for something pretty. So, and finally, we have a dedicated LFO. We have a mod source and mod matrix later on, but we have a dedicated LFO for oscillator pitch here, which is great. As you guys know, I love doing those C6 sounds. I'm actually going to turn off X mod. It's too crazy. It's causing these kind of metallic-y clicking things, which work well for distorted sounds, but I want to make a beautiful polysynth sound. Okay, cool. And finally, mod ramp, which I really like. We can make it so you hit the key and the LFO slowly fades in. So we'll leave that on. That's great. We also have glide here if we want to do like these. We'll go on to the filter, and here's where things get fun. We actually have a state variable filter, a ladder filter, Moog style, as well as a twin filter, which is really cool. It's like a full-on dual filter. So we'll hear how each of these sounds, but first things first, I'm gonna jump ahead to my envelope and just add a little bit of a release on the filter envelope so things ring out. Much better. There you go. Now I can talk and demonstrate things. So let's go through each filter. So you can hear these actually sound really good. Like, I would not be so impressed by this little pedal if the filters didn't sound good, but Meris knows what they're doing with DSP and they sound fantastic. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn off filter envelope for an hour, make it really low, and that way we can just sweep through. So our state variable. Now, state variable filter does not have resonance, really. It has bandwidth, which is going to be kind of like resonance, but it's not quite as musical as the ladder resonance. But what it does have is low pass, band pass, and high pass. So cool, right? So let's move on to my favorite of the three, which is the ladder filter, the classic ladder filter, the Moog sound. and we can go crazy resonant with it. That is peaking. One sec. Let me just turn that down so there's no clipping in the signal there. Very resonant filter. Here's about 2/3 resonance. Beautiful, beautiful sounding filter. So we'll turn down the resonance to about 4.5, bring back up the level, and now we've got a beautiful sounding pad. Lovely. Let's bring in some filter envelope. Really great, right? The final filter type is the twin filter, which is essentially a dual filter there we go. It's kind of hard to hear, but you can hear the two peaks. Can you hear that? I'm controlling 2 separate filter peaks. Now this is really useful for more kind of complex sounds or pads where you really want to poke out different parts of the resonance. It's not stereo, unfortunately, but it is still really cool that we have a dual filter in here. That's something that not a lot of synths have. Love it. Let's go back to our good old-fashioned ladder. And we'll bring in some noise into the mix. This is where you add your noise as well. Right, so right off the bat here, we've got everything we need for an actual real polysynth, right? Which is so cool. Again, it's a pedal. So next up, we'll go to our filter envelopes. We've got different types of envelope. You can just do a basic guitar style envelope, but the most important one for us is the ADSR. We can do a whole bunch of different shapes here. We're gonna modify the attack and decay for both the filter and amp. And then we're gonna grab the release. And now we should have more of a plucky sound. Right? Like, has a lot of character for a digital synth inside a guitar pedal. I'm impressed. We'll move on from the envelopes here to where it starts to get fun. And if you know anything about the other Meris X products, the MercuryX and LVX, where they're magic is that they're really modular effects boxes, and the Enzo X is no different. So we've kind of got a greatest hits selection of the different modules of drive, ambience, and modulation from the other 2 pedals. So let's go ahead and add an interesting drive module. So with no drive, we've got volume pedal. Again, that's more for if you're playing with an input. Some tube distortion. Let's put on the dry signal here and the pre-ambience is perfect because that means it's going to be hitting all of our synth, everything except for the reverb. Let's go ahead. So that's tube, and there's parameters and stuff you can adjust to, right? Like level and gain. Transistor, that's one I really like. You want to get like nice low distortion. Really sick, right? And then op amp, another great type of distortion. These are all from the LVX and MercuryX, so if you want to check out them in more detail, definitely check out my videos on those. That's a great one. Adds a lot of like grit that makes it sound more kind of analog, right? So. But my favorite is the Bit Crusher, like you heard in that intro jam. The fact that there's a Bit Crusher on here and we get like total control, right? Make it just like a nice lo-fi patch. A bit of noise. Or you can really get distorted. Yeah. rowdy. Let's, again, just for the sake of this video, do something a bit more subtle, right? Bring the level down. Perfect, so we're basically just making this into a lo-fi, old school digital synth sound at an 8-bit bit depth. And then yeah, let's keep on going. We can go over this because we're not using any external gear, but you can sync it with MIDI to other clock sources, which is great. And then probably the most exciting part, we've been listening to this totally dry since the beginning. So let's bring in some of Meris's fantastic reverb. This is based on the Prism algorithm, which is probably my favorite of the MercuryX algorithms. So you don't get as much control, but it sounds glorious. Got to be careful of my level there again. That's one thing about this pedal is you definitely do benefit from having a compressor or a limiter after the fact because there's such a big difference in volume between like a totally dry single oscillator sound and then this massive ambient pad, right? But that's a small price to pay because like any good synth, it gives us versatility. Makes me want to change the filter envelope a little bit. Make it a little bit more like brassy, I think. There you go, we're tweaking things. Hopefully this is helpful if you're just watching along. There we go. I'm gonna add just a bit more modulation too, which we can actually do with the mod wheel too. I love that it's hard-coded like most synths. When you plug in MIDI, I didn't have to set anything up. Mod wheel to modulation, as it should be. Beautiful. Okay, as much as I could just lose myself in this beautiful reverb, let's actually change it up because we don't only get reverb, we get different types of reverb, which is cool. We can get kind of like more of a small, realistic reverb, medium one. That's a really nice one. But we can also get a full-on programmable delay with the sound quality you'd expect from Meris, which is really cool. So we've got a dual stereo delay here, and we can change the subdivisions. We can change whether it's half speed. So I kind of like half speed, slows it down, and also kind of, you know, takes some top end off the echoes as far as my ears can tell. Oh, beautiful. I almost like that better than the reverb. Wow, gorgeous, right? Okay, so we're gonna keep the delay on actually. Maybe I'll just change that bit crusher a tiny bit just to be a little bit less intense. I feel like it was really nice when it was dry. There we go. We want to preserve the prettiness of the sound with a little bit of that background noise from the crusher is great. Okay, moving on, modulation. Look at this. Final thing, instead of having to worry about, you know, some poor quality built-in effects, we get a suite of Meris's fantastic built-in effects. And I'm gonna go through all of these because they're so cool. So I'll just play the same basic thing with nothing, then with chorus, flanger, Vibrato. Get another LFO. Phaser. It's a really nice sounding phaser. I don't always use phasers, don't always like them, but this one sounds great. And then ring mod, of course. And again, like everything on all these Meris X pedals, you can choose where in the signal chain it is, right? So if we were playing a guitar into this, we could just have ring mod only on our guitar signal going into the synth, and then basically mix between the synth and our ring mod guitar signal. So cool. We want to get even more gritty. Right? Really cool. I'm gonna keep it simple though and go for a little bit of that phaser, which I really liked. So let's go ahead and change the speed. Kind of a vibe after the delay with just a bit of mix. Yeah, listen to that. All right, let's move on. As I can see, I'm already going pretty far here, but we've got a couple final settings here for mix, if you're mixing between the dry and the Enzo X signal. And then the final thing, and I'm gonna go over this quickly because it's the same as the other two Meris pedals, but it's so cool to see it here again, is we have a full-on mod matrix. So we could, for example, send an LFO to the oscillator 1 pitch, and it'll sound crazy. A little bit extra vibrato, that's actually pretty nice. Maybe make something more obvious that you can hear. There you go, filter envelope amount. There you go, that's more obvious. Beautiful. Okay, let's move on. We also have sample and hold, envelopes, all this cool stuff. Again, you can spend hours in the mod matrix with the sequencer. Check out my LVX editor video if you want to see creative ways of using the Meris sequencer. But yeah, the last thing I want to show you, and sorry guitar players, this is just for synthesizers, but I was really happy to hear that Meris actually implemented my feedback, which was to allow aftertouch to be assigned as an expression parameter, which is fantastic because this is a guitar pedal and it is a fully aftertouch, mono aftertouch, not poly aftertouch yet, but it's a fully aftertouch responsive instrument. So sounds bad making it obvious, but basically I'm controlling the pitch of oscillator 2 with my aftertouch. Okay, how about we try something more subtle, like the filter envelope? That sounded good. So now, hopefully you can see. I'm able to add expression with aftertouch. Perfect. I think our patch is done. Let's go ahead and jam on this. So hopefully that walkthrough and tutorial was helpful and you have a better idea of what the Enzo X does, how it works, and if you do have an Enzo X, hopefully you're able to follow along. Let's finish off with some pros and cons, my final verdict, and most importantly, who this pedal is for. So I'll start off with the latter. I think that the Enzo X is the perfect pedal for someone who maybe is a guitarist as their main instrument, but has been really interested in synthesizers. Come on, don't lie, you want to come to our team. It's more fun over here, cooler sounds, cooler people. Just kidding, I love guitar too. But yeah, if you're a guitarist and you've always been interested by synthesizers, but you haven't really taken the dive in yet, like this is a no-brainer. This is by far one of the coolest synthesizer focused guitar pedals. It is the coolest synthesizer focused guitar pedal ever. Yeah, it's just the fact that it's this high quality of a synth. You have everything you need. You have a mod matrix. It responds to aftertouch, mod wheel, LFO. You can even have a sequencer and arpeggiator in there. Yeah, great effects. It's just such a fully featured synthesizer that the fact that you can control it by guitar is incredible and so cool. If you are a synth player, should you get this? I think that's where it gets a little bit more complicated and you really have to understand the pros and cons. On the pros side, the form factor is incredible, and the fact that you can just seamlessly switch between controlling it with MIDI or with audio in, whether you're a guitar player, bass player, or you want to get weird and try it with your voice. Maybe you're a woodwind player or a sax player and you want to try that. It does switch between line input and instrument input levels. So theoretically, it should work to track whatever you throw at it. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of if that's what you're looking for and you want that different way of controlling the synth, then it's a great option. What about if you just want to use it with a MIDI keyboard? Well, I think in that case, you're going to have to want two things. One, the fantastic quality effects, Meris's effects, the reverb, the delay, all the modulation effects, they're top tier. And you can run this as an effect send, right? Like you could just put only the wet effects on a send and then run your existing synths through that. You can make patches and send them to effects. You're really getting not quite as many modules, but you're really getting a lot of the same modules as the LVX and MercuryX. And then instead of reverb and delay as the main thing, you're getting the synthesis engine. So as far as desktop synthesizers go, this has by far the best effects of any of them in this price range that I've tried. Where I think this is a harder sell, however, is if you are just looking for a synthesizer and you don't care about the form factor or the effects that are built in. I think for the same price, which I believe will be about 600 USD, you're probably better off getting something like a Minilog XD or a Arturia Mini Freak because they have built-in keyboards. Another option in this price range is the Dreadvox Nymphis, which is a beautiful sounding fully analog synthesizer. I reviewed it a couple of years ago. And that to me, I think does sound better because it's just fully analog, let's be honest, but it doesn't have effects. I think it has a reverb that's like laughably bad, whereas this has great built-in effects. And again, that one and none of the ones I mentioned, you can't control them with the audio input. So to sum up my final thoughts on the Enzo X, I think if you're a guitar player looking to get into synthesizers, this is like the perfect diving in point. So good, sounds great. You can control it with MIDI or with your guitar and it'll teach you sound design. And if you're a synthesist, then this is a fantastic option if you play live and you want the form factor with great built-in effects, flawless MIDI control. And if you're someone who's looking for a bit more of that experimental, controlling it with your voice like I did, controlling it with another instrument, it can do that, and nothing else in this price range that sounds this good can. If either of those two people sound like you, then you're gonna absolutely love the Enzo X. As always, thanks so much for watching. Thanks again to Meris for asking me to beta test and be a part of this release. It was really fun giving them feedback on the pedal, and let's end off with one more outro jam.